Roman soldiers froze enemy corpses and displayed them as psychological weapons, on purpose. 9 AD Germania, 3 entire legions, 17,000 men, were slaughtered in the Teutoburg forest during a brutal winter ambush. But before that catastrophic failure, Roman legions had spent centuries mastering something no ancient army ever achieved. They turned winter from their deadliest enemy into their greatest advantage. At Vindeland, a fort near Hadrian's Wall, archaeologists discovered the proof: wool socks, layered tunics, and desperate letters from soldiers begging for more underwear. These weren't comfort items, they were military-grade survival technology that kept legions operational in conditions that had killed Hannibal's army 2 centuries earlier. Today you're discovering the brutal engineering and savage tactics Romans used to dominate frozen battlefields. From the multi-layered wool and leather system that prevented hypothermia, to the camp construction techniques that sheltered 5,000 men in sub-zero conditions, to the psychological warfare of winter sieges, to the catastrophic moment in Germania's forests when these systems weren't enough. You'll see how Rome weaponized frostbite, engineered survival in impossible conditions, and learned from their bloodiest winter defeats. This isn't the sanitized version from textbooks. This is the archaeological evidence and primary sources showing how Rome conquered winter itself. Subscribe, because the real history is always more brutal than what they taught you in school. 58 BC. Gaul. Every general in the ancient world knew the rules. You stopped fighting in October. You stored your grain, you dismissed most of your troops and waited for spring. War was seasonal, predictable, almost ritualized. Caesar broke those rules, and it terrified his enemies. While Gallic tribes settled into their winter villages, crops safely stored in central granaries, Caesar's legions marched through snow and mud. Roman sources describe the Gauls as thrown into complete disorder, having made no preparations for defense during the winter months. They hadn't prepared because no one was supposed to attack in winter. That was the unspoken contract of ancient warfare. Caesar treated that contract as a weapon. This wasn't heroism. This was calculated brutality. He attacked when enemy children were hungry, when warriors were scattered in winter quarters, when morale was at its lowest. He targeted the granaries first, burned the food supply, and you don't need to fight the army. Starvation does the killing for you. Winter became his ally, softening his enemies before a single pilum was thrown. For 8 years in Gaul, Caesar used winter campaigns to shatter resistance. Tribes that thought they had months to negotiate suddenly found Roman standards appearing out of the fog. Leaders who tried to flee discovered that heavy snow slowed their flight more than it slowed disciplined legions. The message spread quickly: not even winter could protect you from Rome. But winter was not loyal to Rome. The same cold that starved Gauls could just as easily destroy Roman legions. Fast forward to the Germanic frontier. The Rhine River could freeze solid, turning from a natural barrier into a 300-mile invasion highway. Germanic tribes understood this better than most Roman senators did. Rome no longer chose to fight in winter. Winter chose Rome. Raids could come when supply lines were weakest, when Roman horses were half-starved and roads had dissolved into ice and sludge. The disaster in the Teutoburg forest in 9 AD, fought in cold autumn storms, exposed the dark side of Rome's winter ambitions. 3 entire legions, around 17,000 men, were wiped out in rain, mud, and freezing winds. Arminius, the Germanic commander behind the ambush, had served in Roman forces. He knew their marching systems, their reliance on roads, their tendency to underestimate terrain in bad weather. He used the climate as a weapon more effectively than Caesar ever had. This is the part history textbooks often soften. Roman winter warfare wasn't about shiny armor and superior technology. It was about controlled suffering. It was about which side could keep moving when their feet were numb, when rations froze solid, when cloaks turned too soaked, freezing weights on their backs. Winter didn't care who was civilized. Winter killed everyone. The only question was who died first. A century later, Emperor Trajan drew a different conclusion. If winter couldn't be trusted, it had to be engineered. During the Dacian Wars, he didn't wait for the Danube to freeze and gamble on conditions. He ordered the construction of a massive bridge, locking a permanent Roman crossing into the landscape. He established stone forts designed for full winter occupation, granaries stocked for months, barracks that could be heated, supply lines planned for year-round operations. In 150 years, Rome's relationship with winter had evolved, from exploiting it as a surprise weapon under Caesar, to suffering under it on the Germanic frontier, to trying to dominate it through engineering under Trajan. But all of that raises one brutal question. How did the individual Roman soldier, marching with 40 kilograms of gear, actually survive in that cold? The Romans had a word for winter quarters, hiberna. To most ancient armies, winter meant going home. To a Roman legion, it meant building a small, temporary city from nothing, and doing it fast enough that men didn't freeze to death while the walls were still going up. A full legion of over 5,000 men could raise a functioning winter camp in as little as 2 to 3 weeks. Not a ring of tents, not a few huts. An organized grid of streets, defensive walls, drainage systems, granaries, workshops, and barracks, designed not just for defense, but for survival in months of freezing rain, snow, and mud. The first decision was location. Commanders didn't just pick a flat field and hope for the best. The ideal site was a southern-facing slope, catching as much weak winter sun as possible. It needed shelter from the prevailing winds, often behind a ridge or inside a natural bowl. And it needed water, close enough for constant use, but not so close that the camp flooded when ice melted or rivers swelled. A bad choice here meant sickness, hypothermia, and dead animals before the real fighting even resumed. Then came the walls. Roman winter camps were enclosed by timber palisades about 3 meters high, backed by earthen ramparts thrown up from the ditch dug outside. That ditch wasn't just a military obstacle. It was also drainage, channeling away meltwater and rain before it turned the interior into a frozen swamp. The result was a perimeter that broke the wind, shed water, and made night attacks suicidal. Inside those walls, the most important structures weren't the headquarters or the granaries. They were the barracks. In summer, legionaries could get by with leather tents. In winter, that was a death sentence. So they built long wooden barracks blocks, framed from heavy timbers, with wattle and daub walls packed and coated in plaster. Roofs were usually thatched and steep, so snow and rain slid off instead of pooling and collapsing the structure. Gaps were plugged with moss, straw, or rags, anything that kept the wind out. Heating was not a luxury, it was an engineering problem. For the rank and file, warmth came from central hearths in each barrack room. Smoke escaped through vents in the roof or through simple openings high in the walls. In officers' quarters and certain key buildings, the Romans went further, using hypocaust systems, raised floors heated from below by hot air and smoke circulating through brick or stone channels. It was the same principle they used in their bathhouses, repurposed here for survival. Insulation mattered just as much as fire. Walls were thick with wattle and daub, sometimes lined on the inside with animal skins or heavy fabrics. Straw was piled along the base of walls and under sleeping platforms. Cloaks doubled as blankets. Everything was about trapping a small pocket of tolerable air in a world of lethal cold. The system that held all this together was the smallest unit in the legion, the contubernium. 8 men, 1 room. Each contubernium shared a single heated space, a room big enough for their gear, low sleeping platforms, and 1 central fire. 8 adult bodies gave off a surprising amount of heat, combined with a constantly tended hearth that could raise the interior temperature to perhaps 15 to 20 degrees, even when outside temperatures dropped to -15 degrees or lower. This wasn't comfort. It was the thin line between life and death. Communal sleeping wasn't just tradition or Roman discipline. It was thermodynamics. 1 man alone in an unheated shelter could be dead of exposure in a few hours. 8 men together could keep each other alive for an entire winter. Archaeology fills in the details. At sites like Vindolanda on the northern frontier, tablets written by officers and soldiers mention requests for warm socks, underpants, and more cloaks, not the wish list of men camping for a few nights, but soldiers facing months of bitter cold. Excavations show carefully planned drainage channels running between barracks, keeping walkways from turning into frozen, ankle-deep sludge. Layers of ash and charcoal reveal constant fires burning day and night. Huge post holes and timber impressions speak of an almost industrial scale of wood use. And that's where the most brutal statistic comes in. A single legionary winter camp could consume an estimated 50 to 100 trees every day for heating and cooking alone. Thousands of men, hundreds of hearths, baking ovens, workshops, forges, every one of them hungry for fuel. Over a single winter, 1 camp might wipe out an entire nearby woodland. Multiply that by years, and by the number of legions on the frontiers, and Roman civilization starts to look like an engine of environmental destruction, strip mining the forests of Europe and the Near East just to keep its soldiers alive. This was winter warfare as a science of survival. Walls to break the wind, drainage to fight ice, barracks to trap heat, and 8 men breathing the same warm air around a single stubborn fire. But even the best-built camp couldn't save a soldier who stepped outside its walls unprepared. Shelter kept you alive at night. The real test came on the march. The next question is brutal and simple. What did a Roman legionary have on his body that let him walk through that cold and come back alive? If a Roman winter camp was a machine for trapping heat, the Roman soldier was the core unit that machine had to protect, and his first line of defense wasn't steel. It was wool. The layering started at the skin. In winter, no sane legionary wore linen. Linen stayed cold, held moisture, and clung to the body like a sheet of ice. The base layer was wool, a tunic, sometimes padded, sometimes quilted, what later sources call the subarmalus. Wool could absorb sweat and still insulate. It trapped tiny pockets of air next to the skin. In a blizzard, that difference meant you stayed merely miserable, instead of dead. Over that came the mid-layer, the sagum. This wasn't a decorative cloak fluttering heroically behind a marble statue. The sagum was thick, heavy wool, tightly woven and slightly oily, which made it naturally water-resistant. It could be wrapped around the body, pinned at the shoulder, pulled over the head, or used as an extra blanket at night. A soldier might sleep in it, march in it, and be buried in it. On the worst days, there was an outer shell, the panula. Think of a hooded cape that fell to the knees, made from felted wool or treated leather. The panula turned driving rain and wet snow from lethal threats into miserable inconveniences. Pull the hood tight, hunch your shoulders, and you had your own microclimate under there, dark, cramped, but warm enough to keep fingers working and lungs from burning with every breath. Then there were the legs. In the polished marble world of Roman statues, soldiers are bare-legged. In the real world of Northern Europe, that was suicide. The Romans knew it, even if they pretended otherwise. They borrowed brachii, trousers, from the very barbarians they claimed to despise. At first, wearing trousers was mocked as unmanly, foreign, almost shameful. But frostbite doesn't care about your dignity. By around 100 AD, any legion on a northern frontier was expected to wear them. Cultural pride lost, survival won. The same revolution happened at the feet. Standard issue caligae, the famous Roman military sandals, were perfect for Mediterranean summers. Ventilated, tough, easy to dry. In snow and slush, they were a death sentence. So winter meant switching to enclosed boots, calcei made from thicker leather, sometimes lined with wool or felt. The open lattice of sandal straps vanished, replaced by full coverage that kept snow out and heat in. Even the soles changed. Hobnails that bit into dry ground became dangerous skates on ice, so some soldiers used smoother soles or different nailing patterns for better grip. From Vindolanda, on Rome's cold northern edge, we get a very human detail. Soldiers writing home begging for warm socks, udones. Imagine that, the most powerful army in the ancient world reduced to the same plea as any conscript today: send better socks. Hands and head completed the system. The Romans understood that you lose heat fastest from the extremities. Wool mittens, digitabula, wrapped whole hands together, fingers sharing warmth in a single insulated pocket. Gloves looked more refined, mittens kept you alive longer. Under helmets, soldiers wore wool or fur caps, padding metal against the skull and protecting ears from the wind. Woolen scarves wrapped around faces turned razor-cold air into something a soldier could breathe for hours on patrol. Here's the part that explodes the movie image. Hollywood loves bronze muscles, bare knees, and sandals crunching through snow. But a real Roman legion on the Rhine or Hadrian's Wall would have looked far closer to a line of early medieval warriors. Hooded, layered, wrapped in cloaks and trousers, boots caked in mud, faces half hidden behind wool. The classical Roman look was Mediterranean propaganda, carved in stone for warm climates and public monuments, not for frozen frontiers. The truth is simpler and far more brutal. An empire that refused to adapt its clothing would have left its soldiers as frozen statues on the edge of the known world. Rome survived in the north because it was willing to look a little less Roman and a lot more practical. But even the best gear meant nothing on an empty stomach. Warmth kept a soldier moving. Food kept him alive. The next question is, how do you feed an army in a landscape where even the rivers are locked in ice? A Roman legionary in summer could fight all day on roughly 3,000 calories. In winter, that same man needed 4,500 to 5,000 just to stay functional. The cold turned his body into a furnace on overdrive. Every shiver, every breath of frozen air, every hour standing guard on a wind-blasted rampart burned fuel. If the calories stopped, his body started cannibalizing itself, and the cold did the rest. So Rome planned for winter like it planned for war. Months before the first snow, grains started moving. Wheat and barley were hauled into stone or underground granaries, the horia, built to stay cool, dry, and rodent-proof. From above, they looked like simple warehouses. In reality, they were 6-month survival batteries for 5,000 men. But grain alone wasn't enough. Winter demanded density. Salted pork, perna, hung in long rows, hard as wood but packed with fat and protein. Smoked sausages, lucanica, were coiled in baskets, ready to be boiled into thick stews. Hard cheeses, cured so thoroughly they could outlast a campaign, added more calories and salt. Olive oil and animal lard were the real winter gold, pure concentrated energy that could be poured over grain or melted into porridge. In some campaigns, a legionary might go through close to a pound of fatty meat a day, not because Rome was generous, but because cold punishes any army that skimps on fat. Then there was the drink that every soldier pretended to hate, pasca. Vinegar mixed with water, sometimes with herbs thrown in. It sounded like punishment, but it was chemistry. The acidity helped prevent scurvy. The herbs added trace vitamins. The liquid itself helped the body digest the mountains of dry bread and grain. And in winter, it was often warmed, turning something barely tolerable into something just comforting enough to keep men from breaking. Hot meals weren't a luxury, they were policy. Twice a day, fires flared in communal kitchens, huge hearths big enough to hold iron cauldrons that could feed entire centuries. Thick barley stews, meat scraps, oil, maybe a splash of wine, not gourmet, but hot, heavy, and life-saving. For outlying posts and watchtowers, portable braziers glowed in the dark, tiny islands of heat where a sentry could reheat his hands and a small pot of food without abandoning his position. Soldiers even heated stones in the embers, wrapped them in cloth or leather, and tucked them under cloaks, ancient hand warmers that kept fingers from stiffening into useless claws. Feeding this machine was a logistical nightmare. Each winter camp needed half a year of food ready before the roads vanished under mud, ice, and snow. Long supply convoys, wagons, mules, oxen crept along frozen routes, perfect targets for ambush. Tracks in the snow betrayed them. Broken wheels left everything stranded and exposed. So Rome did what it always did when planning wasn't enough. Local requisitioning, purchases backed by spear points, emptied village storehouses and town granaries. To the quartermaster, it was efficient redistribution. To the locals, it was death. A single legion of 5,000 men could devour a town's carefully hoarded winter supply in a matter of weeks. Roman soldiers grew heavier, stronger, and warmer. While the people they had pacified watched their children starve, even alcohol became part of the system. In winter, wine rations were often doubled, not for parties, but for calories, morale, and the illusion of warmth. Mixed with water, heated and spiced, calda turned a simple drink into a ritual, a hot, fragrant cup that made frozen nights a little more bearable, and dulled just enough pain to keep men marching. This was the hidden face of Roman genius, spreadsheets of hunger, calculated across entire provinces, but all the food and shelter in the world couldn't save you from Rome's most terrifying winter weapon. Snow didn't just freeze armies. In Roman hands, it froze courage. For most ancient peoples, winter was an unspoken truce. Fields lay dead, roads vanished under mud and ice, and warriors went home to survive. Everyone understood. Real campaigns waited for spring. Rome looked at that unwritten rule and broke it. When Germanic or Gallic tribes saw Roman standards appear out of a whiteout, it wasn't just a military shock, it was a spiritual crisis. The enemy had come in the one season the gods were supposed to protect them. Entire warbands panicked, leadership collapsed. Men fled not because they were outnumbered, but because they believed they were facing something unnatural. The Romans knew this, and they prepared the battlefield months earlier. In autumn, Roman columns didn't just raid. They hunted food. Granaries were burned, smokehouses torched, livestock driven away or slaughtered. The tribes survived on what they had hidden. By February, those hidden stores were gone. So when Roman patrols returned in deep winter, they weren't fighting warriors at full strength. They were facing starving men, sick children, chieftains forced to choose between surrender or watching their people die slowly in the snow. And then there was frostbite, turned into a weapon. Captured enemies could be stripped and left exposed, tied to posts or trees. A merciful commander might offer a quick death by sword. The alternative was hours or days of agony as the cold devoured fingers, toes, and then life itself. Those who escaped or were released carried more than scars, they carried stories. Stories of Romans who let winter do their torture for them. These stories spread faster than any legion could march. To some Germanic tribes, Romans became winter demons, men who walked untouched through snow that killed others in minutes. So the legions leaned into that image. They marched in full kit during blizzards, trumpets sounding, standards raised high. It was theater, brutal, effective theater. The message was simple: we are stronger than winter itself. When your enemy believes that, half the battle is already won. The same logic shaped winter sieges. Roman armies would surround enemy towns in autumn, cut supply lines then. Wait. Behind the walls, grain dwindled, animals were eaten, disease crept in. Outside, the legions rotated guards, stoked fires, ate their planned rations. No heroic storming of the walls was necessary. The cold and hunger did the killing. By the time the gates opened, defenders weren't negotiating. They were begging. Inside the Roman camp, winter did the opposite. Training in blizzards hardened morale. If we can survive this, we can survive anything. The same storm that broke the enemies will become a badge of honor for Roman soldiers. This was the darkest truth of Roman winter warfare. It was designed to break minds before bodies. Rome wanted its enemies to fear winter itself more than battle, and it worked. Entire tribes laid down their weapons without a fight rather than face a Roman winter campaign. But Roman winter mastery wasn't invincible. When the system failed, the results were catastrophic. Frozen Romans are history's most brutal reminder that even empires can misjudge the weather. Teutoburg Forest, 9 AD. 3 Roman legions marched into dense Germanic woods in late autumn. Armor slick with rain, cloaks soaked, supplies stretched thin. The roads dissolved into mud. Shields grew heavier with every step. Bowstrings sagged, javelins slipped from numb fingers. Then the ambush came. For days, rain and cold turned discipline into panic. Formations shattered. Men staggered through knee-deep muck, armor chafing raw skin, breath steaming in the chill air. Many didn't die by sword. They died slower, lost in the forest, wounded, collapsing in the cold, freezing to death during the retreat. Decades later, Roman patrols found bones and preserved bodies still trapped in Germanic bogs. Ghosts of an army that learned too late that winter doesn't forgive mistakes. But the Germans were learning during the Marcomannic Wars. From 166 to 180 AD, the tribes stopped respecting Rome's seasonal rules. They watched, they adapted, then they copied Roman winter tactics. When the Danube froze, Germanic warriors didn't wait for spring, they walked across it. They struck Roman winter camps that were supposed to be safe, hitting fortifications from angles no one expected. Fires went out, storehouses burned. Men who thought winter walls made them invincible suddenly found themselves under siege in their own Hiberna. Even the emperor wasn't safe. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, nearly died from exposure on campaign, proof that no amount of stoic writing could warm frozen bones. Then came the real collapse. In the crisis of the 3rd century, between 235 and 284 AD, Rome's supply system fell apart. Civil wars, plague, and economic chaos ripped the logistical spine out of the empire. Legions in winter camps waited for grain and meat that never arrived. Rations were cut, men starved, mutinies flared. Germanic tribes noticed. They pushed across frozen frontiers, raiding deep into imperial territory while underfed garrisons shivered behind half-manned walls. Whole regions slipped away in winter, not because Roman soldiers forgot how to fight, but because Rome forgot how to feed them. That's the hard lesson. Roman winter survival was a 3-part equation: supply chain, discipline, engineering. Take away any one of those, and the system collapsed. By around 300 AD, Rome's winter edge was gone. Without the machinery of logistics behind them, the invincible legions froze like anyone else. In the end, Rome's winter mastery wasn't about superhuman toughness. It was about organization, and when that organization crumbled, so did the myth. So what can we learn from Rome's winter warfare, its brilliance and its failure? That's where we end our campaign. Roman legions didn't survive brutal winters because they were superhuman. They survived because of three things: engineering, logistics, and ruthless discipline. Their winter camps were architectural marvels. Their clothing system was practical genius borrowed from barbarians. Their supply chains could feed 5,000 men for 6 months in hostile territory, and their psychological warfare turned winter itself into a weapon of terror. But when that system broke down, when supplies failed, when discipline crumbled, when the engineering couldn't keep up, Romans froze to death just like everyone else. So what's the lesson? Survival isn't about toughness, it's about systems, and even the greatest empire in history learned that the hard way. If this changed how you see Roman history, subscribe for more hidden truths that rewrite what you thought you knew. See you next week with a new history deep dive.